Everything stated in this video is my own opinion and is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please do not send hate to anyone mentioned in this video.
You did not once address the issues that I mentioned in my video.
He just said, well, she deserves it. I don't care. She deserves. That's his response to my comment. I'm like, that's when I start side-eyeing him. I'm like, dude, this is not healthy.
And so it's just really frustrating that Josh has this fan base of super loyal followers who are not going to question him on this. They're not going to call him on his crap, and the ones that do are going to get blocked and deleted. And another really frustrating part is that this is not the first time Josh has done something like this.
You can pretend all you want that you don't watch videos about you. You are full of shit. You're a fraud, you're a hypocrite, and everybody knows it. More and more creators are coming out against you.
But if you really care about the children as you say you do, then you would pay attention to the fact that a lot of people aren't paying attention to your actual message. And in fact, it's gotten to the point where a lot of people have hypothesized that what your message isn't what you're claiming it is.
Every Sunday, many people wake up, get ready, and make way to their place of sanctuary. A place where they feel safe, where they're given messages from their holy texts and encouraged to introspect, and are emboldened to be better people and help those around them. But what happens when the environment overshadows the message? What are the consequences when the ego of the pastor Goliaths the sanctity of his role? What is the outcome when the church becomes the epicenter of people who go out and hurt others under the guise of false enlightenment? It's no secret that religious entities have been criticized and rallied against for millennia for their exclusionary, oppressive, and in some cases, cult-like behavior, but that is not the focus of this video. By no means am I generalizing all pastors, churchgoers, or religious entities as evil or malfeasant. As someone who was raised in the church and experienced similar events discussed in this video, I feel my goal is to draw parallels between toxic pastorship and the actions of the Dad Challenge podcast with evidence, psychology, and sometimes even his own words. It's important to note that Josh has an extensive history in the church. He has a several-part series where he talks about his involvement as a member, a subsequent rise into leadership, and then termination from his position. He has not since returned to any leadership role in the church except to the one that he has created. I also find it pertinent to mention here that I don't believe Josh's current position on his platform is a result of intentional design from the genesis of his channel, but I do believe that it was inevitable at a certain point due to his personality and worldview. Regardless of original intention, the value of his position appreciates what is now being provided to him through money, success, and attention instead of his self-proclaimed true achievement of spreading a message, which has been thrown to the wayside. Today we'll be breaking down the Dad Challenge podcast based on his intellectually dishonest and manipulative tactics and how they are implemented in his audience control. This is the Church of Dad Challenge podcast. Before we can delve into the similarities of Josh and toxic church leadership, we must first discuss what his moral philosophy is and how that affects his rationale, actions, and goal achievement methods. Moral disengagement theory is what I believe best describes Josh's disposition. An article from the American Psychology Association's collection called Journal of Personality and Social Psychology describes moral disengagement theory as converting harmful acts to moral ones through linkage to worthy purposes, obscuring personal casual agency by diffusion and displacement of responsibility, misrepresenting or disregarding the injurious effects inflicted on others, and vilifying the recipients of maltreatment by blaming and dehumanizing them. I'll do my best to insert clips of each concept being demonstrated by Josh, but for transparency, there are just too many for me to include every example of these being implemented, so only a few examples will be given. The most apropos factors to Josh's moral disengagement theory application are moral justification, portraying inhumane behavior as having a moral purpose in order to make the action more socially acceptable. This is the foundation of moral disengagement theory. This is seen frequently and consistently throughout Josh's content to excuse his aggressive and inappropriate behavior. From his perspective, his ends justify his means, therefore his actions towards that goal are inherently virtuous. Josh claims he only bullies and degrades parents he personally deems as bad, exploitative, and dangerous, therefore his actions, however misguided, are inherently morally sound in his mind.
But my message is clear, and it is without refute. Exploiting kids is wrong, and anyone who does it deserves all the vitriol I can dish out and more. So now we're at the point where we're justifying bullying.
I make fun of people surface, but I think it's fair game that if you are an influencer on the internet influencing other women, and in turn making it super negative because there's no way they're going to be able to line up to who you are, okay? And you make your money doing that, I'm going to bring you down a peg or two. And so when people are like, oh, I can't, he makes fun of women. Yeah, I've been doing that the whole damn time on this channel, everybody. The whole time, okay? And I won't stop. They'll say, oh, I do those things. And I'm like, that's great that you do those things. You're awesome, though. That's the difference. You don't exploit your child, though. That's the difference.
Euphemistic labeling, a means to make injurious and harmful behavior respectable and reduce responsibility for it from the person with the help of intricate rephrasing. Detrimental behavior is made innocuous and acceptable, and people who are part of it are liberated from feeling a sense of guilt. Josh typically uses persuasive definitions, which are stipulative definitions disguised as a claim or reportive definition designed to keep the emotional connotation of a word while changing its application. The words rely on cognitive and emotional meaning that it can be used to manipulate the perception of a word depending on its implementation to the negative or the positive. In simpler terms, Josh uses more dramatic or histrionic language in order to portray a person, action, or event as worse than it is, and uses sanitized or vague language to portray the same as less consequential or serious. This is an extremely easy way to construct a narrative using only the art of misrepresentative language, which leads a viewer to believe an action is worse or better than it is, depending on which way the narrative is leaning.
For some reason, Maya's really good at pouring alcohol on her kids. If you're in a situation where I've seen 2 videos already where you've poured alcohol on your kids, that's what I consider trashy. This is a trashy thing to do. Taking your kids to a bar, and it's not a restaurant, that's a bar. Taking toddlers to a bar, and look, they poured wine on them, and she's cracking White Claws and pouring White Claws on her kids by accident.
Advantageous comparison. This concept exploits the principle of contrast, where individuals compare their own immoral actions to their counterparts' immoral actions in order to trivialize and minimize their own conduct. This is also seen consistently throughout Josh's justification of his treatment to bad and exploitative parents. Be advised that this concept's purpose is only to describe the situational benefits of comparing conduct, not assign high or low moral value to each side. An example of this would be Josh saying, yes, I do degrade and shame women for their bodies and fashion choices, but they're bad mothers, therefore minimizing his actions in the viewer's eyes. Disregarding or misrepresenting injurious consequences. When the detrimental results of one's conduct are ignored and when causal effects are not visible because they are remote from one's behavior on the physical and mental level, it is extremely easy to disassociate oneself from the consequences of their actions. People are less likely to engage in undesirable behavior if they're able to see the inflicted pain, making it more difficult for depersonalization to occur. This is a prevalent and persevering concept when navigating online spaces in general, not just for the Dad Challenge podcast, but it is still a pillar in Josh's disposition on his channel. He often doesn't see the true consequences of his actions, which further aids in relieving whatever guilt he may feel, if any, in an out of sight, out of mind kind of way. Dehumanization. This is a process in which individuals are denied human attributes such as thoughts, feelings, aspirations, and concerns in order to justify inhumane behavior inflicted upon them. The moral exclusion and delegitimization of others allows the aggressor to objectify their victim in such ways that relieve the psyche of guilt and ownness. Although Josh claims to not be a misogynist, dehumanization is a core premise in the mind of a misogynist amongst other attributes. His ever-evolving and expanding aggression and disgust towards typical, societally inconsequential, and personal choices and behaviors women exhibit removes the humanness and soul of a person, making them just a character to him.
They're fake. Everything about them is fake. Every absolute little thing about them, right down to their effing eyelashes, is fake.
Theoretically, dehumanization and moral disengagement theory in general allow Josh to alleviate the cognitive dissonance he may or may not experience as a result of his actions. So how does moral disengagement theory play into audience control and toxic pastorship, you may ask? Keep all of these ideas in mind while we move on to the toxic pastorship section. To make the argument that Josh parallels a toxic pastor of a church, we must first discuss what makes a church leader toxic. And for the record, not all undesirable qualities a pastor can have will apply to Josh due to the context of their respective platforms. For example, it would be difficult to make the argument that Josh has the undesirable quality of speaking for God that some pastors might possess because Josh's platform doesn't base itself on relaying a higher power's word, only his own. However, many stratagems do overlap. This list is sourced from pastoral and religious websites, blogs, literature regarding inappropriate and toxic behaviors of pastors. Although each of these sections could be their own video, I will try to be as succinct as possible. I also cannot possibly cover every overlapping symptom, so these are only a select few. The pastor seeks a minimalist structure of accountability. Just as a pastor may disregard his congregation and only listen to his clergy, this is often seen with Josh's choice to only listen to his ever-changing inner circle of moderators who has hand-selected and vetted as missionaries for his plight. He insulates himself with sycophants in order to give the impression of accountability, even though these moderators are heavily biased towards his own opinion, essentially guaranteeing that his own thoughts and opinions on his actions are upheld. It can also be observed that Josh labels any criticism or accountability as hate, therefore writing off anyone, even a genuine fan outside of his inner circle, as inherently incredible for opinions.
Or I said something you didn't like, and then you kind of took off, and now you're on their side, which is fine. But it happens a lot. There's a lot, and there's been YouTubers I've been connected to who I thought were really cool, and then they're just like, oh, Josh is the asshole now. And this is one of the things that bugs me the most about the detractors or the people who've left, or whatever the case may be. When they say something like this, they say, you know what, I gave him criticism, or I gave him feedback, and he didn't accept my feedback. He got angry at my feedback. And then, how dare he get angry at my feedback? Like they expect me to say, thanks for the feedback, I'm going to change everything about what's grown my channel to this level. Yeah, I'll change everything. No, guys.
The pastor is more focused on money and image than being a conscientious leader. This is fairly self-explanatory, so I won't go into too much detail. This references my earlier statement of Josh's platform status and value of his position, appreciating what is now being provided to him through money, success, and attention, rather than his self-proclaimed true achievement of spreading a message, which has now been thrown to the wayside. Even if this wasn't his original intention, the fact remains, this is the current state of his channel. It has been alleged that Josh is currently buying subscribers, bullying, harassing, and stalking creators, some of which who have no online presence anymore, except for what the Dad Challenge podcast posts of them. All in all, despite still saying that he's a crusader for children's privacy, his main focus is what makes him money and gets people watching. Here's a clip from his Ex-Pastor series.
Churches are a big marketing. They have social media, they have video, they have production to get your butt in the seat so that you stay and you pay. If you don't think that's the way it is, you're wrong, and I lived it, so I'm right. The pastors who get to stick around and make all the big bucks and be the celebrities and everything else, the ripple effect is there, yes, but it's shallow. And eventually, they all fall. You eventually get too big, you fall. Because every sin you're going to do is exasperated 100-fold. Because when you get into a position of power and money and influence and fame, even as a pastor, it will corrupt you indefinitely. Absolute power, money, fame corrupts every individual. But all these other pastors, this is all they have. And this, once you start making big bucks and big dollars and everything else, and fame, and your people love you, and you're this person in a community that you're like above here, and you're elevated, you get cocky and you get narcissistic about it all. There's just too much power and people in these churches who are in there for the wrong reasons. There's too many people in leadership in there for the wrong reasons. For power, for the clout it gives them in their communities, for being a person that's visible and like, oh, you're a leader and like, I love you.
The pastor expects behavior of others they don't expect of themselves. Do as I say, not as I do. Again, there are too many examples to list here, as this section could be its own video. Josh constantly contradicts himself in his message with discrepancies between his words and his actions. This is comparable to a pastor preaching to not engage in salacious behavior whilst having an affair in secret, except Josh is far more public with his hypocrisy. Josh constantly takes stances on online issues only to later contradict what he has previously said while maintaining that both positions are true beliefs. He will say that he does not degrade women, then says he only degrades women who are bad mothers, but only does so to let other normal mothers know that these influencers are not perfect and to not compare themselves to them. He will say that others should not post videos of their children if they have a large audience, yet he himself has potentially inappropriate, uncensored videos of his own children public on his own channel available for anyone to view, which he refuses to remove from his channel. He strikes down other creators' videos for featuring his heavily censored children, yet has an entire channel showing other creators' children with minimal or no privacy afforded. This is basic hypocrisy. They see almost everyone as inferior to themselves. You will hear them criticizing other leaders while building themselves up. This is seen in the context of the Dad Challenge podcast through his opinions of other anti-family channel creators. While they essentially all purport the same message, that family vlogging is harmful and exploitative, Josh views others as lesser specifically due to them speaking out against him, having less subscribers or less impact than he perceives himself to have. A channel called radiantbritt comes to mind specifically as she was once friendly with Josh and supported his channel but has spoken out against him in light of his recent behavior. When they had a conversation regarding her criticisms about his declining quality, he insulted, gaslit, and shamed her, and he now sees her, a person who agrees with his message, as inferior to himself. There are countless other examples of Josh downing other anti-family channel commentators despite agreeing on the same message. This is a huge point that his followers take to when watching his videos, as they also see Josh as kind of this kingpin of anti-family vlogging commentators and subsequently go after anyone Josh doesn't like, citing less views, less subscribers, etc. as the reason to perceive them as inferior to Josh, despite, again, believing in the same cause. They show favoritism. It's clear that they have a favored few while they marginalize the rest. This not only applies to Josh's inner circle of moderators, but also applies to the family vloggers he speaks out against. He has outright stated that certain creators, such as Aaron Williams, are his favorites, and has also acted softer towards certain individuals who he claims to be against, like Jasmine Cheyenne. They had an interview where he was happy and giggled with her, borderline flirting, which was not received well. According to his own doctrine, he says that he is saliently against affording these people any social niceties, yet fails to do so when interacting with his favorites. They are manipulative. Their most common tactic is using partial truths to get their way. Manipulation and intellectual dishonesty are extremely complex and subjective topics, and we could spend hours discussing all the different ways that Josh is manipulative, and even if he's self-aware or not. Essentially, everything I have and will talk about in this video is manipulation, but in the future, I may dive deeper into his intellectually dishonest tactics. Josh constantly employs a number of logical fallacies, hypocrisy, mental gymnastics, and moral disengagement theory, which pastors also employ often as well in order to lead their congregation. The pastor does not allow for pushback or disagreement. When someone does disagree, he or she becomes the victim of the leader's anger and marginalization. A common occurrence for the Dad Challenge podcast, Josh usually finds a way to invalidate the critic rather than the critique, and writes off any criticism as hate, subsequently disregarding it. This is observed through the previously mentioned conversation with radiantbritt and Josh's proclivity to dox, such as when he doxed Apoc in response to a call-out video. He often flips between attacking those who criticize or finding a way to, in his and his audience's mind, delegitimize the critic and their disagreement with his actions. Not allowing for pushback or disagreement from his audience is also a common theme, and this marginalization is happening more and more. The followers who are written off as haters when giving him criticism typically go on to see all the things that they had either missed or dismissed when they were a fan due to Josh removing the rose-colored glasses which painted him in a better light. They are self-absorbed. In fact, they would unlikely see themselves in any of these symptoms. In my opinion, this is perhaps one of Josh's largest and most detrimental character flaws. The ability to introspect is not used often by many people, and it's used even less by those who really need to do so. This concept is why people say if you've ever wondered if you're a narcissist, you're probably not. The humility one must possess in order to accept criticism for what it is just not a trait viewers see often from the Dad Challenge podcast. I am of the opinion that Josh views his brutish and overbearing persona as confidence and charisma, and those who like him see him this way as well. This is a crucial step in crowd control. Appear likable, magnetic, and unapologetically hold your perceived moral high ground despite the consequences of your actions. This in turn empowers and emboldens the listener to adopt the feeling that what the speaker is saying is correct and use this as a template for how they navigate society. There's a few stereotypical examples in relation to the church. Many pastors are often local politicians, enough said, and the seemingly sweet older church-going women who secretly, and often not so secretly, engage in harmful behavior in the name of holiness, maternity, or whatever else they can use to justify their judgment. But I digress. Self-absorption and misrepresentation of their character and integrity are how some of the worst leaders in history of the world have risen to power. And although Josh could never be as bad as some of those autocrats, it's still important to identify the behavior that he refuses to change or acknowledge, because it's already a problem. So if you've made it this far, I'm sure you have an opinion on Josh himself, or at least the information I've presented to you. Maybe you wanted to see how long I can baffle gab for, or you're doing what is referred to as hate watching. Either way, you're here and you listened. And that's more than Josh himself could say, as I'm sure he would never acknowledge the existence of this video. And even though at this moment I feel very strongly about Josh and his actions, as always, my opinion is fallible and subject to change upon discovery of new information. As much as I want to be wrong about Josh, I really don't feel that I am. There are many ways Josh could hold himself accountable for his choices, but until that happens, I'll be here. Thanks for watching, and at the risk of sounding pretentious, I leave you with this quote from King Lear. "Thinkest thou that duty shall have dread to speak when power to flattery bows? To plainness honor's bound when majesty falls to folly."